Today we're creating 6 different road types for our battlefields. Each one I've designed to capture a different part of Middle-earth. Each build ranges in complexity from simple to more complex, but every single one is possible with some simple tools and sometimes a little bit of patience. Every section is chaptered so you can jump straight to the build that inspires you the most. But first, let's lay some foundations that we'll be using across all the roads. Cut your XPS foam to size. I'm using 8 inches by 4 inches for each section. For the sides, take another piece, 8 by 2 inches, and cut a gentle, random curve starting from the centre of each end. This gives the road a natural flow and ensures that any two pieces line up perfectly when placed together. With a pen, run it across the edges on the side to add a little slope and help it blend in better. Once glued, you'll have the foundations for your road. A 2-inch walkway that works perfectly for D&D campaigns and MESBG skirmishes. Before we dive in, just one little tip on dry brushing. It's really going to be our friend here. To dry brush, wipe most of the paint from your brush and gently sweep it over the surface. The raised areas catch the paint while the deeper recesses stay dark, creating instant texture. We'll use both heavy and light dry brushing. More paint for heavy, less for light. We'll start simple, the Flagstone Road. Hit the surface lightly with a rock to break up that perfect foam texture. Next, make the flagstones themselves. Cut thin strips of XPS foam, roughen up the edges, then cut them into irregular tiles. Drop them into a tub of mixed sand and shake it well. The sand will gently round the edges, making the stones look worn and ancient. And yes, close the lid before shaking, trust me on that one. Glue them into place and sprinkle fine sand into the gaps for a natural look. Once dry, give everything a black base coat, then a dark dry grey brush, leaving black in the recesses. Follow with a lighter grey on the top edges for contrast. Around the sides, blend dark and light browns. This will form the base for our grassy verge. Sprinkle a mix of sawdust flocks in various tones. Let it sit for a moment, shake off the excess, and you'll start to see life appear. Add some pigment powders for subtle colour variation. And a few grass tufts for depth. And there we have it, a classic Flagstone Road. Maybe one that leads to Minas Tirith itself, the perfect meeting place for Eowyn and Faramir. From beauty to bleakness with the Ashen Road of Mordor. Start by breaking the surface again with a rock, just lightly. Then carve a crack through the centre using a sharp craft knife. Make it jagged and random. Widen it gently with a pen, then add branching fissures off the main line. On the edges, apply earth texture paste and sprinkle in fine sand for added variation. base coat the entire surface black. Then dry brush dark grey, followed by the lightest hint of light grey. Now the lava. Paint inside the crack with Wazdaka red. Then blend in orange fire on the wider areas, like glowing magma breaking through the crust. Add dark patches of black pigment for a scorched, ashen feel. And finish with ultramatte varnish to remove all the shine. A dry, lifeless path, a road fit only for the orcs of Mordor marching through toward the Black Gate. This one's all about controlled chaos. Start with the rock texture again, then brush Mod Podge through the centre and sprinkle a mix of fine and coarse sand. That's your base for a cracked, ancient road. Add earth texture paste to the edges and more sand to blend everything together. Now the secret. Water down some PVA and soak the entire surface and sprinkle in another layer of sand while it's still wet. As it dries, the glue pulls and clumps the grains together, forming those hardened, broken ridges that look like earth baked by centuries of heat. Once dry, give it a black base coat and a dark grey dry brush, and finish the edges with layered browns and greys. For the final touch, glue down brown sawdust flock along the sides and a few dry grass tufts, like dying plants clinging to life on the road to the Black Gate. This is the path the armies of the West would take, brittle, bleak, but unbroken. Now let's cool things down. Coat the base with Mod Podge, sprinkle larger bits of sand for stones, then fine sand across everything. Once dry, paint a pale blue base coat and a dry brush with pale grey to bring out the texture. Mix a quick Payne's Grey wash with Flow Improver, brushing it more heavily in the centre where meltwater might gather. Dry brush again with pale grey for frosty highlights. Add 2mm white static grass along the edges with a static grass applicator. Already it's starting to feel colder. Layer in snowy tufts. Then use Valhallan Blizzard technical paint to add realistic snow build-up, along rocks, in cracks and on the tops of the grass tufts. The result? A frozen road, wind-swept and silent, waiting for the Fellowship to cross. Now for a wet dirt track, we go back to the warmth of the lowlands. Hit the foam with a rock to add deeper dents. These will hold the puddles later. Apply a thick layer of earth texture paste across the surface, then sprinkle fine sand on the edges. I drag a cocktail stick through the paste to form wagon tracks, maybe the same ones from Farmer Maggot's wagon, taking his goods from his fields to Bree. Once dry, paint black, then brown, blending in subtle greens and greys to add a richness to the soil. Finish with a light brown dry brush to highlight the ridges. To get that freshly rained on look, add some gloss varnish to the road for a wet sheen. Now for the greenery. Apply Mod Podge and add green flock with a static applicator. Variation in the grass is where the details really pop. Layer some foam flock for bushes, and a variety of sawdust flock in random patches like scattered wildflowers. Seal it with watered Mod Podge applied via a pipette. If it beads on the surface, spritz a little isopropyl alcohol to help it flow better. Finally, pour small amounts of clear resin into the deeper spots, wagon ruts, puddles and crevices. I use a wooden spoon to drag some smaller bits of resin into some smaller puddles. That's your wet dirt track, perfect for Farmer Maggot and his dogs chasing off two mischievous hobbits. Now for a big one, the swamp crossing, inspired by the dead marshes. Start with a coat of Mod Podge, then scatter stones, dark sawdust flocks and crushed leaves. Add in some sawdust flock, browns, purples and yellows for that rotting vegetation tone. Once dry, dab some brown and green paint onto any blue foam still showing through. Don't overthink it, randomness sells the realism. Next, we'll need a way to cross. Let's build a broken walkway. Roughen some bamboo sticks with a craft knife. Paint them dark brown, then lightly dry brush with a light brown. Cut those into short posts. Next, add some lollystick planks. Split the lollysticks lengthwise for crossbeams. Glue these into place with a hot glue gun. And I add some of this moss in gaps where the resin will sit later. Tape up the base edges. Then mix up about 40ml of resin. Mine is 1:1 by weight. Tint it with yellow-green, a touch of blue and a touch of brown to give it that sickly, swampy tone. I pour it into the centre and tilt the base to help it spread. I break the surface tension along the edges with a stick to blend it in better. Then leave it to cure and peel the tape from the edges. Now we can admire that murky water. For the planks, texture some balsa wood with a wire brush. Paint and glue them down, then dry brush with light brown and grey. Apply some washes, Nuln Oil for depth, Agrax Earthshade for dirt, Athonian Camo Shade for a mossy colour. I work the green from the outside inward, as if the few people brave enough to step across the dead marshes have disturbed the moss in the middle of the walkway. Dry brush with greys on the edges to bring out some contrast. Now we can finish with a thin mix of Agrax and Athonian. Damp, grimy, perfect. The washes should leave a nice satin sheen. Now let's add some additional detail and height to the banks. Add some sawdust flock. And I also cut these paint brushes and they act as perfect reeds. Those get hot glued down. And I stick on a few grass tufts. Seal that in with a satin varnish for that soft wet shine. And there it is, a swampy path through the dead marshes, stinking, ancient and alive with detail. Every one of these builds told its own story. Each technique here can be mixed, layered or adapted for your own world, whether it's a path through Rohan or a causeway to Minas Tirith.